Ted Bundy was an enigma. To the outside world, he was a charismatic young man with a bright smile and a magnetic personality. He was charming, educated, and well-spoken, everything one might expect from a successful and law-abiding citizen. He worked as a legislative assistant, volunteered for political campaigns, and even had a girlfriend. But behind the facade of a perfect life was a cold, calculating killer who was capable of unspeakable horror. Ted Bundy's ability to charm his way into the lives of his victims is what made him so terrifying. He wasn't just a man who committed brutal murders. He was a master manipulator, someone who could lull his victims into a false sense of security before turning on them without warning. Bundy's ability to manipulate wasn't just limited to his victims. He managed to manipulate those around him, including law enforcement and psychologists, for years. He understood the power of perception, and he used it to his advantage. To him, manipulation was a game in which the stakes were the lives of his victims. It wasn't just his looks that attracted people to him. Ted Bundy had a way with words. He was highly articulate, confident, and had the kind of presence that made people feel at ease, even when they were in a vulnerable situation. He knew how to make people believe that they were safe, that they were in good hands, and that he was someone they could trust. His manipulative tactics were subtle at first. He would approach women in public places, pretending to be injured or needing help. Sometimes he would feign a disability like an arm in a sling or pretend to be lost. These innocent gestures were the perfect ruse to lure women into his trap. Once they offered help, he would escalate the situation, charming them, making them feel safe before revealing his true nature. Bundy's ability to control the situation extended beyond his victims. He knew how to manipulate people's emotions, how to appeal to their sympathy, and how to make them feel like they were in control when, in fact, they were not. This was part of his genius. He didn't just manipulate women into trusting him. He manipulated everyone around him to believe that he was just like them. A good, law-abiding citizen. A man who could not harm. But Bundy's charm wasn't just about winning people over. It was about control. He used his charm as a weapon to manipulate people into doing what he wanted. He would play on their emotions, their desires, and their vulnerabilities, all the while maintaining the perfect image of a man who could do no wrong. Bundy's ability to manipulate didn't end with his victims. It extended to police investigations and interviews with psychologists. Even when he was arrested, he remained calm and charming, working the system to his advantage. He was a master of deception, a man who could lie without hesitation and manipulate those around him to see him as the victim, not the criminal. Ted Bundy's charm was his greatest weapon, but it wasn't just about his looks or his ability to speak smoothly. What made him so dangerous was his psychological insight, his ability to read people, to sense their vulnerabilities, and to use them against them. Bundy was a master of manipulation, and his methods were sophisticated. He knew exactly how to play on his victims' emotions, their fears, and their desires. His manipulations were not just surface level. They went deep, tapping into the very core of his victims' psyches. One of Bundy's most effective psychological tactics was his ability to create a false sense of security. He would approach women in public spaces, usually at night, pretending to be someone who needed help. He might ask for assistance with something like carrying books or ask for help finding his car. His victims, seeing no immediate threat, would often agree to help. But what made Bundy so dangerous was how he used that initial trust to manipulate his victims. Once they were close enough, he would subtly shift the situation, leading them to a secluded area or taking them somewhere isolated. At this point, they would realize that the help they had offered was part of his plan all along. But by that time, it was often too late. Bundy also used emotional manipulation as a tool. He knew how to make people feel guilty or responsible. If a woman expressed any hesitations or concerns, he would play on her emotions, using words and tactics that made her feel like she was obligated to help him. In some cases, he would even use his apparent vulnerability to gain sympathy, pretending to be weak, helpless, or disoriented. This was all part of his strategy to make his victims feel responsible for him, easing them into a false sense of control. But his manipulations weren't just psychological. Bundy also used mental games to keep law enforcement at bay. Even after his arrest, Bundy managed to manipulate investigators. He was charming, confident, and highly intelligent, which made him a formidable adversary during interviews. He would engage in discussions, making detectives feel like they were getting closer to him, all the while manipulating the investigation from within. One of the most shocking examples of Bundy's manipulation was his ability to manipulate his own public image. He presented himself as an upstanding citizen, a man who could not possibly be guilty of such heinous crimes. Even as his crimes escalated, Bundy managed to maintain a charming and intelligent persona that convinced people around him, even psychologists and law enforcement, that he wasn't capable of what he was doing. His charm and manipulation were so effective that even after he was arrested for one murder, Bundy continued to manipulate the situation. He convinced people that he was innocent, even managed to escape from custody twice, and continued to play the game of deception until the very end. This psychological warfare was what made Bundy so terrifying. Not just his violence, but his ability to manipulate, deceive, and control. He made the people around him believe in his innocence, made his victims believe they were helping him, and made the law enforcement believe they were closing in on him, even as he slipped away. Ted Bundy didn't just choose random victims. He chose those who would be easiest to manipulate. His victims were often young women, typically in their late teens or early 20s, who were vulnerable for a variety of reasons. Some were alone at night. Others were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what all his victims shared was vulnerability, something Bundy could sense and exploit. He was known for his ability to read people and identify their weaknesses, and he used that talent to plan his approach carefully. Before he attacked, he would take note of his victims' emotional state and environmental surroundings, calculating whether or not they could be manipulated into trusting him. Bundy would often approach his victims with a pretext, making them feel comfortable and safe enough to let down their guard. His favorite tactic was to pretend to be injured or in need of assistance. He would approach women in public places like shopping centers, libraries, or even at the beach, and pretend to have a broken arm, a crutch, or some other disability. He would ask for help carrying something or claim that he was lost and needed directions. His goal was to get his victims to feel sympathy for him so that they would agree to help him, and in doing so, make them feel like they were in control of the situation. Once he had their trust, Bundy would guide them into a more secluded area. Sometimes he would offer to drive them home or walk with them to their car, but the end goal was always the same: to isolate them from potential help. It was at this moment, once he had them away from other people, that Bundy would reveal his true intentions. He would overpower them, often using his charm and physical strength to control them. This manipulation wasn't just about trust, it was about control. Bundy had a way of disorienting his victims, making them feel as though they were in control of the situation even though they were not. He would often use psychological tactics like flattery, suggestion, and even hypnosis-like techniques to lower their guard and make them feel at ease. One victim, Carol Duranche, recalled that Bundy would constantly tell her how smart and brave she was for offering to help him. He told her that he trusted her, building an emotional bond to make her feel good about herself. At the same time, Bundy was calculating every move, thinking several steps ahead. He knew exactly when to move in for the attack, and his manipulation ensured that his victims couldn't defend themselves. It was the emotional manipulation that made Bundy so effective. He didn't need brute force alone. He needed to control their minds before he ever laid a hand on them. By the time the physical attack came, his victims had already been mentally subdued. But even after the attacks, Bundy continued to manipulate. He would often leave psychological scars on his victims, telling them that they were lucky to have survived. This served a dual purpose. It made them feel guilty for surviving, while also giving him a sense of superiority. He was the predator, and they were the prey who had escaped by mere chance. Bundy didn't just kill his victims physically, he also killed them mentally. The emotional and psychological manipulation was just as deadly as the physical violence. Perhaps even more so, Ted Bundy was arrested in 1975, but his manipulation tactics didn't end with his capture. In fact, the trial would become another stage for him to showcase his remarkable ability to deceive. Not just the public, but also the legal system, psychologists, and even the jury. Bundy was intelligent, charismatic, and highly articulate, qualities that made him stand out in the courtroom. His confidence was contagious, and he quickly became the center of attention during his trial for the murders of 2 college students, Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman. But Bundy wasn't just playing the role of a defendant. He was playing the role of someone wrongfully accused, a man who was too smart, too charming to be guilty of such horrific crimes. At first glance, Bundy appeared to be just another handsome, clean-cut, well-dressed man who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. His defense team tried to paint him as an innocent man caught up in a case of mistaken identity. He smiled at the cameras, gave speeches, and played the role of someone who simply didn't belong in a courtroom. He had a charming demeanor and a calm, measured tone that made it hard for people to believe he could be capable of such violence. But beneath the surface, Bundy was working his usual tactics. He manipulated the media, using the courtroom as a platform to craft his public image. He made sure to look good in front of the cameras, often smiling and maintaining eye contact with the jury, as if to reinforce his innocence. But the smiles were a mask. Behind them was a man who had calculated every move, someone who knew exactly how to play the system. Bundy was also a master of psychological manipulation. He knew how to turn the tables on the prosecution. When the evidence started stacking up against him, Bundy would shift the narrative. He would use subtle psychological tactics to confuse the witnesses, discredit the prosecution's arguments, and cast doubt on the credibility of the entire investigation. He often asked questions that made the prosecution look unprepared or disorganized, leaving the jury to question the integrity of the case. Despite representing himself, Bundy was well-spoken and calculated in his cross-examination of witnesses. He questioned them with an air of authority that made it seem as though he had a thorough understanding of the law, even though, in reality, he was simply using charm and manipulation to make himself appear credible. He even used his charm to manipulate his relationships within the courtroom. Bundy was known to be polite to the court staff, which allowed him to form a rapport with the judge, lawyers, and even the jury. This sympathetic persona played into the narrative that he was innocent, especially when compared to the more aggressive and confrontational attitudes of other defendants. His self-confidence was unshakable. Even when the evidence mounted against him, he refused to back down. Instead, he doubled down on his narrative, casting himself as a victim, as someone who had been wrongfully accused. He made sure that every word that left his mouth painted him in the most positive light, while deflecting any guilt or suspicion. He was a chameleon, able to blend into the background, shifting the attention to anyone or anything but himself. But despite his confidence, cracks in Bundy's mask began to appear. As the trial wore on, it became clear that his charm couldn't cover up the weight of the evidence. Bundy, however, never stopped trying to manipulate the system, and his ability to continue the charade, even as the noose tightened, is what truly sets him apart as a master manipulator. For Ted Bundy, interviews were not interrogations. They were performances. Every time he sat across from detectives, psychologists, or reporters, Bundy shifted into a different version of himself. A version designed specifically to manipulate the person in front of him. He wasn't just answering questions. He was studying his audience, adjusting his tone, posture, and words to create the exact impression he wanted. To Bundy, these interviews were opportunities to control the narrative, to rewrite the story, and to maintain power, even from behind the bars of a prison cell. Detectives later recalled that Bundy had a peculiar way of speaking during interviews. He rarely seemed nervous, even when the questions were sharp. Instead, he appeared relaxed, leaning back in the chair, smiling periodically, as if he were the one conducting the interview. He would often say things like, "That's an interesting question," before giving a carefully structured answer that revealed nothing but sounded thoughtful. Bundy used the interviews to withhold information, to drip-feed hints and clues, and to keep law enforcement chasing shadows. He made sure that even when he wasn't physically free, he remained mentally in control. One of Bundy's most infamous tactics was speaking about his crimes in the third person. He would say, "A man like that, a killer like him might have done this," and then describe his own crimes as though he were analyzing someone else. This wasn't just a psychological trick. It was a shield, By creating distance between himself and the crimes, Bundy avoided emotional responsibility while also presenting himself as someone who understood the mind of a killer, someone almost helpful to investigators. He transformed himself into a pseudo-expert, a man with insights the police needed. Psychologists later described this as a classic manipulation tactic, distancing language to avoid guilt while portraying oneself as intelligent, observant, and indispensable. Bundy also manipulated by controlling timing. He would delay answers, pause dramatically, or shift the topic just long enough to frustrate interviewers, and then reel them back in with a calculated confession or hint. The push-pull dynamic made investigators feel they were always on the verge of a breakthrough, exactly where Bundy wanted them. He also controlled who he spoke to. Bundy refused to cooperate with certain detectives but opened up to others. He studied their personalities and selected those he felt he could intimidate or charm. He spoke differently to each audience. To psychologists, he played the role of the misunderstood intellectual. To journalists, he became the charismatic, falsely accused man betrayed by the system. To detectives, he shifted between arrogance and cooperation, depending on what frustrated them most. What made Bundy especially dangerous was how deeply he enjoyed this. Interviews were not burdens for him. They were games played with precision and calculation. He thrived on the attention. The more the world tried to understand his mind, the more elusive he became, leading investigators deeper into his maze. Even in his final days on death row, Bundy used interviews for one ultimate purpose: to stay relevant. He confessed selectively, withholding enough details to keep everyone guessing. Every word was designed to extend his influence, to prolong the spotlight, and to make himself unforgettable. For Bundy, manipulation did not end when the killing stopped. It was woven into every interaction, every smile, every sentence. It was his identity, his power, his final weapon. Ted Bundy was a master manipulator, and his relationships with women were no exception. He understood love as a tool, a weapon in his arsenal that he could use to gain control, distract, and deceive. He didn't view his romantic entanglements as genuine connections. They were strategies. Bundy's most well-known relationship was with Elizabeth Cloakford, a woman he dated for several years during his early killings. Elizabeth was intelligent, successful, and attractive. Everything that Bundy desired in a partner, yet she was also someone he could easily manipulate. Elizabeth initially saw Bundy as an ideal man, charming, handsome, and emotionally available. She was drawn to him, much like many others, by his charismatic personality and apparent vulnerability. Bundy was able to win her over by being attentive, kind, and gentle. But, much like his other victims, Elizabeth was drawn into a false sense of security. Bundy's tactic was to keep Elizabeth emotionally invested in their relationship while he maintained his secret life as a serial killer. He portrayed himself as misunderstood, a man who had been wronged by society but was trying to find redemption. For Elizabeth, the man she loved seemed like a flawed person, but one who was ultimately capable of change. Bundy played on her sympathy and used it to create emotional attachment. As the relationship progressed, Elizabeth started noticing discrepancies, odd behaviors, sudden absences, and what seemed to be hidden truths. She began to suspect something was wrong, but Bundy was too clever. He would shift the focus back onto her, making her doubt her own instincts. When Elizabeth confronted him, Bundy would either gaslight her, questioning her perceptions, or charm her with smooth words, telling her that she was overreacting or being paranoid. He also used strategic silence and emotional withdrawal to gain control. If Elizabeth ever became too upset or suspicious, Bundy would shut down emotionally, leaving her feeling helpless and confused. This gave him the upper hand in the relationship. His silence would make her question her place in his life, leading to a cycle of self-doubt that would always bring her back to him. Even when Elizabeth began to piece together the disturbing clues, the women who went missing in areas Bundy had visited, the unsettling behaviors he displayed, she struggled to believe that the man she loved was capable of such monstrous acts. Bundy knew how to use his charm to distract her from what was happening around them. He would take her on trips, shower her with attention, and promise her a future together, all the while carrying on with his killings. Bundy's ability to manipulate went beyond just emotional control. He was also highly intelligent and used his knowledge to keep Elizabeth in a state of constant confusion. He would often turn their arguments into discussions about philosophy or psychology, twisting his words to make himself seem like a misunderstood intellectual. If she ever questioned his behavior, he would respond with logic, convincing her that she was simply too emotional or too irrational to understand. It wasn't just Elizabeth. Bundy had multiple relationships throughout his life, and he used similar tactics on each of his romantic partners. His manipulative behavior was never about genuine love. It was about power and control. Bundy knew how to weave an intricate web of deceit around his victims, ensuring that they never fully saw him for who he truly was. Bundy also preyed on women's deepest fears, the fear of loneliness and the desire for validation. He understood that many women felt an overwhelming need for affection and approval. By offering them that affection and then taking it away, he created a psychological pendulum effect, forcing them to keep chasing his approval. His emotional unpredictability kept them hooked. As his crimes escalated, Bundy's relationships became more complicated. Eventually, Elizabeth grew suspicious and started to distance herself from him. But by the time she had enough evidence to go to the police, Bundy had already manipulated the situation to make himself seem like the victim. He gaslighted Elizabeth into questioning her own perception of the events. When Bundy was finally arrested, his manipulation tactics were laid bare. His charm, his control, his psychological games. But by then, his victims had already paid the price. Not just physically, but emotionally, as Bundy had stolen their peace of mind, making them question. Ted Bundy's trial wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was another opportunity for him to manipulate, to twist the narrative, to control the situation, and to maintain his image as an innocent man. For Bundy, the trial was his final stage, and he played it with the same charm, confidence, and psychological manipulation that had made him such a dangerous predator. As Bundy sat in the courtroom, he wasn't just a defendant facing the death penalty. He was a performer, a man who could control the atmosphere with a well-timed smile, a calm demeanor, and the illusion of confidence. His appearance in court was calculated. He dressed impeccably, his hair neatly combed, and his posture rigid with purpose. Every inch of his body language was a deliberate act to convince the jury, the media, and the public that he was just like them. A normal man wrongly accused of horrific crimes. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Bundy's charm was so potent that even some of the courtroom staff found themselves sympathetic to him. His articulate responses and his calm demeanor made it difficult for many to accept that he could be the monster they had read about. Bundy's most effective manipulation tactic during the trial was his ability to make the prosecution look disorganized. He would often ask questions that subtly undermined the credibility of the witnesses, cast doubt on the evidence, and keep the jury on edge. He was a master of deflection, redirecting attention away from the horrific crimes he had committed and focusing it on the flaws in the investigation. Bundy would question the accuracy of forensic evidence, the credibility of the testimonies, and the competence of law enforcement officers. In a key moment during his trial, Bundy even cross-examined one of the witnesses, a woman who had survived one of his attacks, and attempted to discredit her testimony. His questions were subtle, often leading the witness to doubt her own recollection of the events, making the courtroom audience believe that the survivor's testimony was unreliable. The tactic worked, at least temporarily, as it left the jury questioning the strength of the case against him. But Bundy's manipulation wasn't just confined to his courtroom behavior. Outside the trial, Bundy maintained his charming facade for the media, giving interviews and smiling for the cameras. He appeared as the wronged man, one who had been framed by a corrupt system, and his confident demeanor made it difficult for the public to reconcile this image with the brutal killer he was accused of being. In an infamous press conference, Bundy famously played the victim. He talked about the unfairness of the trial, the lack of evidence, and the suspicion that surrounded him. It wasn't the words that captured the public's attention. It was Bundy's charisma, his ability to speak directly into the camera, to look the public in the eye, and to exude a calm, almost soothing confidence made him appear trustworthy, even as his words belied the horrific truth. Throughout the trial, Bundy refused to break down. Even as the evidence mounted and the jury was increasingly convinced of his guilt, Bundy remained steadfast, unflinching, and in control. He continued to manipulate the courtroom atmosphere, keeping everyone on edge, unsure of whether they were dealing with a charming criminal mastermind or a man who had simply been wronged by fate. It was this manipulation, this ability to maintain psychological control, that kept Bundy from being fully seen for who he really was. His ability to appeal to the public sense of fairness and to position himself as the misunderstood victim meant that he remained a fascinating figure even as the world began to understand the depths of his crimes. By the time the trial reached its conclusion, Bundy had manipulated the public, law enforcement, and even some of the jury members into doubting the validity of the case against him. It was only when the mountain of evidence became insurmountable, when the survivors bravely took the stand and the forensic evidence became too detailed to dispute, that Bundy's charm began to unravel. But even then, he still clung to his manipulation. Even as he was convicted, he would insist that he was innocent, that he had been framed by forces beyond his control. Bundy's confession also shifted focus from the victims to himself. He didn't express remorse for the lives he had taken. Instead, he spoke of his desire for the world to understand him, to acknowledge his brilliance in evading capture for so long. His focus on himself was chilling. He was still, even in his final moments, trying to manipulate the narrative to favor himself, to make people believe that he was somehow misunderstood. The psychologists who interviewed him were astounded by the psychological depth of Bundy's manipulation. He rarely showed signs of remorse. Even as he confessed to brutal acts, there was no real sense of guilt in his voice, no sorrow for the families he had destroyed. Instead, he spent much of the time attempting to justify his actions, painting them as inevitable, as though he were bound by fate to commit them. His final confession was calculated, not just an admission of guilt. Bundy knew that the world was watching, that his legacy would be shaped by these last moments. By confessing, he could take some control over his fate, even as the clock ticked down to his execution. In some ways, it was his final act of defiance, an attempt to rewrite his story, to make the world remember him not just as a killer, but as a man who had evaded justice for so long only to give it up on his own terms. As Ted Bundy's execution date drew near, the world awaited his final moments with bated breath. He had been convicted of countless murders, but there was one thing he had never done: truly confess. He had spoken in vague terms, hinted at guilt, but had always stopped short of taking full responsibility for his actions. In his final days, Bundy made a decision that would shock the public. He would finally confess. But even in the final hours of his life, Bundy remained a master manipulator, using his last moments to control the narrative one final time. Bundy had spent years in prison, in the years leading up to his execution, maintaining his innocence and manipulating the public perception of him. But now, as death loomed, he knew the time had come to speak. Why the sudden change? Was it the looming execution that finally broke him? Was it the pressure of a system that had finally caught up with him? Or was it, as it always had been, his manipulative nature coming to the surface once again? The truth was far darker. Ted Bundy had a final game to play, one that would allow him to control his legacy, even in death. As Bundy was being prepared for his final moments, he was visited by a team of psychologists, journalists, and law enforcement officials. They had all been trying to get a clear confession from him for years, hoping that one last truth could be unearthed. Finally, on January 24, 1989, he agreed to speak with detectives from Florida, psychologists, and even journalists, revealing details of his crimes in a manner that only Bundy could: calm, composed, and without remorse. He admitted to killing more women than had been proven in court, a staggering number. He provided chilling details about his methodology, explaining how he lured women with his charm and pretended to be injured, only to overpower them once they were close enough. Bundy described his methodical approach to murder, saying that it was a process for him, a process that he could control. But as the details unfolded, it was clear that Bundy was doing more than just confessing. He was manipulating the narrative. He spoke with a certain level of calm detachment, even while discussing the most horrific crimes imaginable. His emotional detachment felt almost rehearsed, as if it were just another performance, another way for him to control the public's perception of who he was. When the day of his execution arrived, Bundy maintained his calm demeanor. He had manipulated every moment, right until the very end. As he was strapped to the electric chair, Bundy was asked if he had any final words. His response was brief. "I'd like to say I'm sorry for the things I've done, but I'm not sure I can." It was a final manipulation, an attempt to paint himself as remorseful, even as he had shown none throughout his time in prison. Ted Bundy's final confession didn't bring the closure that many had hoped for. For the victims' families, law enforcement, and the psychologists who had spent years studying him, his admission of guilt was a double-edged sword. While Bundy had finally spoken out about his crimes, the way in which he confessed, and the way he had manipulated those around him, left a lingering psychological impact that extended far beyond the trial and his execution. For the families of Bundy's victims, his final confession was a bitter pill to swallow. Many of them had spent years hoping for answers, yearning to understand why their loved ones had been taken in such a brutal and senseless manner. Bundy's confession, which was laced with a sense of detachment and calculation, only added to their anguish. His inability to show remorse, his focus on his own brilliance as a criminal, left the families feeling as if the man who had taken their loved ones was unrepentant, and worse, that his manipulations had never truly ended. One of the most disturbing aspects of Bundy's confession was his emotional detachment. For decades, psychologists had tried to understand the psychology of serial killers, but Bundy's lack of empathy was almost pathological. His inability to connect emotionally with the gravity of his actions made him seem less like a man who had committed horrible acts and more like a machine, a being capable of erasing the humanity of his victims without a second thought. Even in his final moments, Bundy didn't show the remorse that so many people expected of him. Instead, he continued to manipulate the narrative, using his last moments to control the public perception of who he was. For the families, it felt like the last betrayal. For law enforcement, Bundy's confession was equally disturbing. They had spent years chasing a ghost, trying to piece together the puzzle of his crimes while he toyed with them, evading capture again and again. In many ways, Bundy had won the psychological game. His manipulation of the investigation, his ability to play the system, and his charm had made it nearly impossible for law enforcement to catch him until it was almost too late. Even as Bundy was convicted, he continued to manipulate the media and the public perception of him, making it seem like the authorities had failed to truly understand who he was. His confession felt like a final, quiet victory, an assertion of his superiority. But the most lasting impact of Bundy's confession was felt by the psychologists who studied him. For decades, they had attempted to unravel the mystery of Bundy's mind, trying to understand what made him tick. Many of them believed that his lack of remorse was a product of psychopathy, but his ability to manipulate and deceive suggested that he was something far more dangerous. Bundy was not just a man who had committed horrific acts. He was a master of psychological warfare, someone who could manipulate not just his victims but the entire world around him. Bundy's confession didn't provide the closure that investigators and psychologists had hoped for. Instead, it left them with more questions than answers. How did a man like Bundy, intelligent, charming, and seemingly normal, become capable of such evil? How had he fooled everyone around him for so long? And perhaps most hauntingly, what did his lack of remorse say about the nature of true evil? In the years following Bundy's execution, his case continued to be studied by criminal psychologists and investigators alike. His ability to manipulate and deceive was unparalleled, and his legacy became one of the most chilling examples of the power of psychological manipulation in modern criminal history. The impact of his crimes and the psychological aftermath of his confession would continue to shape the field of criminal psychology for years to come. Ted Bundy's name remains synonymous with evil, but it's also become a symbol of the complexity of criminal psychology. Even decades after his execution, Bundy's manipulative tactics continue to shape how law enforcement, psychologists, and criminologists approach and study the minds of serial killers. He wasn't just a man who killed. He was a master manipulator, someone who used charm, intellect, and psychological warfare to control not only his victims, but also the criminal justice system and the public perception of him. His legacy is still felt in how we understand psychopathy, manipulation, and criminal behavior. Bundy's ability to manipulate those around him was groundbreaking in the field of criminal psychology. Unlike many serial killers who rely solely on physical violence, Bundy was able to evade capture for so long due to his psychological tactics. He was the epitome of calculated behavior, someone who meticulously planned his actions not just in terms of the killings but in the manipulation of the people around him. Bundy's ability to use his intelligence, charm, and knowledge of human behavior made him a unique case study. His ability to present himself as a normal, law-abiding citizen, while committing unspeakable acts of violence, forced psychologists to reassess how they defined and understood psychopathy. One of the primary ways Bundy's case has influenced criminal psychology is in the study of psychopathic behavior and emotional detachment. Bundy exhibited classic traits of psychopathy: superficial charm, lack of empathy, manipulation, and an overwhelming need for control. What made Bundy particularly fascinating was his emotional detachment from his victims. Unlike many serial killers who show signs of remorse or regret, Bundy remained cold and calculating throughout his crimes, showing no remorse for the suffering he caused. His lack of empathy and ability to lie without hesitation made him a perfect example of a psychopath. The way Bundy manipulated his relationships with women is another element that criminologists still study today. He didn't just deceive women into trusting him. He played on their emotions and fears, making them feel responsible for him. His ability to create trust and then betray it was not just about winning the affection of his victims, but about maintaining control. Even in relationships where he wasn't physically attacking his partners, he used emotional and psychological tactics to maintain dominance. His ability to keep women under his control without using overt violence made him a unique figure in the study of criminal relationships. Bundy's manipulation of law enforcement and the media is another area that continues to be analyzed. He turned the criminal justice system into his stage, playing the role of an innocent man while engaging in calculated deceit. His ability to manipulate the public perception of him through media appearances, interviews, and his courtroom behavior showed how intelligent and strategic he was in controlling his narrative. Even after his arrest, Bundy remained a figure of fascination. His ability to manipulate his way through his trial, using charm to gain the sympathy of some observers, highlighted how even in a highly structured system, a skilled manipulator can find ways to escape the truth. In addition to his manipulative behaviors, Bundy's legacy has also led to a deeper understanding of how killers blend into society. Bundy's case showed that not all serial killers fit the stereotypical image of a violent, unpredictable madman. Bundy was, for the most part, calm, measured, and well-spoken. His crimes were premeditated, and he carefully selected his victims. This challenge to the traditional understanding of serial killers has forced criminologists to consider the role of intellect and psychological manipulation in the commission of serial crimes. Ultimately, Ted Bundy's manipulations left a lasting mark on the field of criminal psychology. His case has become a teaching tool for law enforcement officers, psychologists, and criminologists. Understanding Bundy's methods of manipulation has allowed professionals to better identify the signs of psychopathy, narcissism, and manipulative behavior in others. His crimes and his ability to manipulate everyone around him have provided insights into the complexity of human behavior, the psychology of serial killers, and how charm and deception can be used to control others. Bundy's legacy also serves as a reminder. Sometimes the most dangerous individuals are the ones who appear to be the most ordinary. Ted Bundy didn't just murder his victims. He manipulated them, emotionally destroyed them, and left a lasting imprint on the world of criminal psychology. His case will continue to be studied and dissected for years to come, as experts attempt to unravel the true nature of his mind and understand how he managed to evade justice for so long. Ted Bundy's capture and execution marked the end of an era, but his legacy continues to shape how law enforcement handles serial crimes and manipulative criminals to this day. The lessons learned from Bundy's case have left an indelible mark on criminal investigations, shaping the strategies and methodologies employed by investigators when dealing with complex cases. One of the most important lessons Bundy taught investigators was the power of manipulation. Law enforcement had to come to terms with the reality that not all criminals are what they seem. Bundy wasn't the stereotypical violent criminal. He was well-spoken, intelligent, and charming, qualities that allowed him to blend in with society and avoid suspicion. His case showed law enforcement that even the most normal-looking individuals could be capable of monstrous acts, making it harder to identify threats in the future. In the years following Bundy's arrest, law enforcement agencies across the country began to revise their profiling techniques and better understand the characteristics of psychopaths and serial offenders. The FBI and other agencies developed more sophisticated ways of identifying psychopathology in potential suspects, understanding that intelligence, charm, and manipulative behavior were often red flags. Bundy's case became a teaching tool for psychologists, criminal profilers, and detectives who were tasked with tracking down others who had similar manipulative tendencies. Bundy's psychological manipulation of law enforcement also had a profound impact on criminal investigations. His ability to manipulate the system, from his self-representation in court to his ability to evade capture, forced investigators to rethink their investigation strategies. His case highlighted the need for a more comprehensive approach to investigating serial crimes, one that considers not only the physical evidence but also the psychological profile of the suspect. Investigators learned that in cases involving manipulative criminals like Bundy, it wasn't enough to simply look at the evidence. They had to look at the behavior of the suspect, understand the psychology behind their actions, and anticipate the manipulative tactics they might use. Moreover, Bundy's case was one of the first high-profile instances in which the psychological manipulation of a killer was fully exposed to the public. His charming demeanor, his ability to deceive and manipulate everyone from his victims to law enforcement, helped draw attention to the reality that psychopaths and sociopaths could be exceptionally skilled at hiding their true nature. In many ways, Bundy forced the world to rethink the way we understand human behavior and how it can be manipulated for deadly purposes. The media's coverage of Bundy's case also had lasting effects. The way he manipulated public perception, using his charm to make himself seem like the victim, the misunderstood man, highlighted the dangerous power of media manipulation. Bundy's ability to use the press to his advantage became a case study for how criminals could control the narrative and shift the focus away from their crimes. Investigators learned the importance of maintaining control over media coverage, understanding that the public can be swayed by a charismatic individual who knows how to craft their own image. In the years following Bundy's execution, law enforcement agencies around the world began to build on the insights gained from his case. Psychological profiling became a critical tool for identifying potential serial killers, and investigations became more focused on the psychological motivations behind the crimes. The Bundy case served as a stark reminder that a killer's mind can be just as dangerous as their physical acts of violence. Today, Ted Bundy's name still invokes fear, fascination, and curiosity. His case is frequently used in criminal psychology courses, documentaries, and investigative reports as a way to understand the complexities of criminal behavior. His manipulative tactics, his ability to charm, and his psychological warfare against both his victims and investigators continue to serve as an example of the chilling potential of the human mind when it is left unchecked. Ted Bundy's capture and execution marked the end of an era, but his legacy continues to shape how law enforcement handles serial crimes and manipulative criminals to this day. The lessons learned from Bundy's case have left an indelible mark on criminal investigations, shaping the strategies and methodologies employed by investigators when dealing with complex cases. One of the most important lessons Bundy taught investigators was the power of manipulation. Law enforcement had to come to terms with the reality that not all criminals are what they seem. Bundy wasn't the stereotypical violent criminal. He was well-spoken, intelligent, and charming, qualities that allowed him to blend in with society and avoid suspicion. His case showed law enforcement that even the most normal-looking individuals could be capable of monstrous acts, making it harder to identify threats in the future. In the years following Bundy's arrest, law enforcement agencies across the country began to revise their profiling techniques and better understand the characteristics of psychopaths and serial offenders. The FBI and other agencies developed more sophisticated ways of identifying psychopathology in potential suspects, understanding that intelligence, charm, and manipulative behavior were often red flags. Bundy's case became a teaching tool for psychologists, criminal profilers, and detectives who were tasked with tracking down others who had similar manipulative tendencies. Bundy's psychological manipulation of law enforcement also had a profound impact on criminal investigations. His ability to manipulate the system, from his self-representation in court to his ability to evade capture, forced investigators to rethink their investigation strategies. His case highlighted the need for a more comprehensive approach to investigating serial crimes, one that considers not only the physical evidence but also the psychological profile of the suspect. Investigators learned that in cases involving manipulative criminals like Bundy, it wasn't enough to simply look at the evidence. They had to look at the behavior of the suspect, understand the psychology behind their actions, and anticipate the manipulative tactics they might use. Moreover, Bundy's case was one of the first high-profile instances in which the psychological manipulation of a killer was fully exposed to the public. His charming demeanor, his ability to deceive and manipulate everyone from his victims to law enforcement, helped draw attention to the reality that psychopaths and sociopaths could be exceptionally skilled at hiding their true nature. In many ways, Bundy forced the world to rethink the way we understand human behavior and how it can be manipulated for deadly purposes. The media's coverage of Bundy's case also had lasting effects. The way he manipulated public perception, using his charm to make himself seem like the victim, the misunderstood man, highlighted the dangerous power of media manipulation. Bundy's ability to use the press to his advantage became a case study for how criminals could control the narrative and shift the focus away from their crimes. Investigators learned the importance of maintaining control over media coverage, understanding that the public can be swayed by a charismatic individual who knows how to craft their own image. In the years following Bundy's execution, law enforcement agencies around the world began to build on the insights gained from his case. Psychological profiling became a critical tool for identifying potential serial killers, and investigations became more focused on the psychological motivations behind the crimes. The Bundy case served as a stark reminder that a killer's mind can be just as dangerous as their physical acts of violence. Today, Ted Bundy's name still invokes fear, fascination, and curiosity. His case is frequently used in criminal psychology courses, documentaries, and investigative reports as a way to understand the complexities of criminal behavior. His manipulative tactics, his ability to charm, and his psychological warfare against both his victims and investigators continue to serve as an example of the chilling potential of the human mind when it is left unchecked. Ted Bundy's name is etched into the annals of criminal history, not only for his brutal crimes, but for his unparalleled ability to manipulate. Even years after his execution, his legacy continues to influence the study of psychopathy, criminal psychology, and law enforcement practices. While Bundy's crimes were horrific, his ability to deceive and manipulate has shaped how we now understand the minds of serial killers. One of the most lasting impacts of Bundy's case is the psychological insight it has provided into the behavior of manipulative criminals. For years, psychologists and law enforcement officers had theories about how criminals like Bundy might think and act, but his case exposed just how complex and dangerous the mind of a manipulator could be. Bundy showed the world that serial killers weren't just monsters lurking in the shadows. They were often charismatic, charming, and highly intelligent individuals who could blend into society, conceal their true nature, and use psychological manipulation to control others. Bundy's case has had a profound influence on modern psychological profiling. In the years following his conviction, criminal psychologists and law enforcement began to recognize the need for a more nuanced approach when investigating serial killers. No longer could law enforcement simply focus on physical evidence. Bundy's manipulative nature showed them that a killer's psychological state, their ability to deceive, and their understanding of human behavior were just as crucial to solving the case. Profilers began to focus more on personality traits and behavioral patterns rather than just the methods of the crime itself. Bundy's legacy also lives on in the way law enforcement approaches suspects who fit a certain mold. Before Bundy, law enforcement might have dismissed someone who appeared clean-cut or professional as an unlikely killer. But Bundy proved that killers can come in all shapes and sizes, and they can hide in plain sight. His case showed that criminals, especially those who possess Bundy's intelligence and charm, could easily manipulate their way out of suspicion. Now, detectives and investigators are trained to look for psychological clues, not just physical ones, and to recognize when a suspect's charm might be part of their manipulation. Bundy's impact also extended beyond law enforcement. The media's role in shaping public perception was evident throughout his trial and subsequent coverage. Bundy was able to manipulate the press, creating a public persona that led many to believe he was a wronged man rather than a cold-blooded killer. In the era of social media and 24-hour news cycles, Bundy's case serves as a cautionary tale of how a skilled manipulator can use public opinion to their advantage. Today, the media is much more cautious about how it portrays suspects, recognizing that public relations can influence an investigation as much as the evidence itself. On a deeper level, Bundy's legacy has made us confront the psychological darkness within ourselves. Bundy wasn't just a killer. He was a reflection of the potential for manipulation that exists in all of us. His ability to control and deceive exposed the vulnerabilities in human nature, our need for validation, our desire to be seen as trustworthy, and our tendency to believe the best in people, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. While Bundy's actions were horrific, his ability to manipulate his victims and the world around him has forced society to reconsider how we view evil. Is it something that exists only in the extreme cases we read about in crime novels? Or is it something more subtle? Something that lies beneath the surface, hidden in the charm and intelligence of a predator? Bundy's final moments were not just an end to his life, but a final act of manipulation. Even as he was facing death, he continued to control the narrative, playing the role of the misunderstood man. His manipulations didn't stop at his trial. They lasted until his final breath. And in the years following his execution, the world continued to be captivated by the mystery of how a man so seemingly normal could become one of the most notorious serial killers in history. In the end, Bundy's legacy is one of manipulation, control, and psychological warfare. He was a man who mastered the art of deceit and used it to destroy lives. But he also served as a cautionary figure, a reminder that evil doesn't always look like what we expect. It can be hidden behind a charming smile, an intelligent demeanor, or a perfectly normal life. And that is perhaps Bundy's most lasting legacy, the ability to make us question the truth and the dangers that lie beneath the surface of human nature. Subscribe to Enter the Crime for weekly documentaries on unsolved cases, mysterious disappearances, and criminal masterminds who changed history.